Hello everyone. Good evening. Hope you're all fine. Welcome to a very special evening. I'm very excited to be chatting. Please do bear with me. This is my first type of event like this. It's also please also bear with me. My 2-year-old toddler may come running in at any moment. So Nada, if you're listening, thank you very much for occupying both of our little munchkins. I promise to make it up to you. And welcome. I hope we're going to have a lot of fun this evening. We've got a small program lined up, but some really exciting things to unpack. So those of you who don't know, this is a live event to commemorate 1 year since we released Behind the Frontline documentary. And it's really to reflect on and to take stock of what has transpired over the past year, what has changed, what hasn't changed, and hopefully to also get into a really cool discussion about what is going right, what's changing. And on the lineup this evening, I'm very excited to be chatting with 2 junior doctors who will be sharing their experiences working on the front line. I think it's very important to hear of voices on the front line. Full disclosure, I haven't worked a day on the front line during COVID. I'm not in clinical medicine anymore. And it's very important, therefore, to have that perspective of people that are actually working on the front line still. And then I hope to have a really interesting discussion with a good friend of mine, Cyan. Hi, Cyan, I see you on. About mental health. Cyan released a documentary specifically about mental health in junior doctors. And we hope to unpack some of the causes and drivers of mental health and what are the systemic effects of mental health, of adverse mental health in doctors, and why it's so important to all of us, really. And then a very exciting conversation a little bit later on with Prof. Drova. Prof. Drova is an absolute champion. She's an ambassador of junior doctors' rights. She's something of a mentor to me, I would say as well. I absolutely love what she's doing at UKZN, and she's going to be sharing some insights with us and hopefully inspire people. Inspire you where you are working, inspire you to take up the conversation with your management to do something similar. So I really hope that it's a positive conversation rather than a vent session. Although there's nothing wrong with venting, we can always vent. But before we begin, I thought I'd take a moment to just reflect on the past year. For me personally, what has transpired, what has changed, what has not changed, and then us as a society, us as the medical community. The number one thing is COVID. COVID is always there, but there are a few other things I think which have changed and or have not changed that we need to reflect on. For me, I'll start off with my hair. Many of you would have seen that the man bun is gone, to which I'm sure some of you are sad, but most are actually relieved. In fact, my manager said a few weeks ago, Adol, where's your man bun gone? Do you know that we used to call it a Tony fail? To which I said, well, not to my face. And I think that's generally the sentiment. So many of you would be relieved. I know Nada is definitely relieved. We'll get that out of the way. What's also changed is that I have a daughter since the documentary was released. A lovely daughter. She's almost 2 months old now. And I think it's changed my perspective a lot. You guys that do follow me will see that my content has shifted a little bit to include a lot more gender-specific issues, especially around women's health and sexual and reproductive health. And I'd like to think that she has a large role to play in that. For a long time, I didn't have to grapple with these issues, being a male, to be frank. So faced with rearing and bringing a daughter into the world, you kind of faced with these issues and more head on than what I was before. And so for the first time, I'm really grappling with it. And so, I really hope that this is a space I'll grow into, to be more of an advocate for sexual and reproductive health, especially of women, and have more of these conversations, these frank conversations about these issues. And vaccines, man. Vaccines are topical. since the documentary was released, the context was very much still around PPE. Remember that saga, that frontline healthcare workers weren't getting enough PPE? And now it shifted somewhat to vaccines, and how frontline healthcare workers are pleading for people to get your damn vaccine before the fourth wave. So the context is somewhat different. But at the same time, unfortunately, a lot has still said the same. In fact, I just rewatched the documentary before I came on here now to remind myself of the stories, remind myself of the sentiment of maybe really why I went to the effort of creating this in the first place. And unfortunately, a lot has still stayed the same. We are still seeing bullying, we are still seeing discrimination. And if anything, what COVID has shown us is that it's the mental health challenges of healthcare workers are actually rising during COVID than compared to before. And you'll hear in a moment from Lara, who will share quite eloquently her own struggles with mental health. And I think it's really important to emphasize these type of stories, because it's only through storytelling that we really can paint a picture of what these challenges are. So yeah, the purpose is then, as I said, number one, to remind ourselves of these stories, of the real problems that healthcare workers actually face, to unpack mental health, and then to move towards focusing on the solutions. So without further ado, I'm going to add Lara and Clementine. Now you see, this is where you must bear with me. This is the first time I'm doing this. Let's see. Who are the names now? Okay, there we go. Invite. Clementine. And I'll add Lara.
Hi.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Fine, all the way from my on-call room. Very nice on-call room.
Fantastic, man. Hi, Lara.
Hi, guys.
How are you both
Hi,
doing?
Laura.
We're surviving.
Good.
At
I mean,
least
first
I'm
of
at
all,
home.
Clementine, it's fantastic. When we spoke offline, we spoke about how this will just add to the authenticity.
Okay.
I can see there's a oxygen pump behind you. So guys, if Clementine must run to a recess, please do excuse her. We don't want to have a
No.
recess going viral on the live.
Everyone is stable. Everybody's okay. We'll be
Or
fine.
otherwise, we can kind of just give you tips. Your compression isn't deep enough, or start
You
bagging,
guys.
think about your H's and T's.
Yeah, let me not go into that rather. Let me not.
But thank you very much, both of you, for joining. Lara, you too, for making the time. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. Clementine, maybe let's start off with you. Could you tell everyone who you are,
Okay.
what role you play, and then, let's start off with that.
Okay, I'm Clementine. I'm only a doctor for 9 months, almost 10 months now. I work in the Eastern Cape. I think it's been a huge adjustment going from student doctor to junior intern doctor. I think it's something that you can't anticipate until you actually go through it yourself. And there's nothing that anybody could have said to me to actually prepare me for it until I arrived here. I'm very grateful still to be a doctor in this country. But I also am also quite passionate about mental health. And last year, the reason I know Adil actually is because I took a big interest in the BTF documentary last year, and he came on as an advisory kind of role when I was writing a piece or reflection on mental health in the Garden Route district, where I was working last year, and looking at what drives mental health and also resilience in healthcare workers in that kind of context. So I was reflecting on myself as well, how I'm now in that position on the front line. versus being a spectator almost last year. So yeah.
Fantastic. Welcome. Lara, are you keen to give a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you that don't know me, which is probably a majority of this audience, I'm Lara. I have been a doctor for almost 3 years now. I'm doing my ComServe in the Western Cape. Spent 2 years of my life in KZN as an intern there. And yeah, I must say, when it comes to mental health, especially amongst healthcare workers, it's been something I've been passionate about for quite some time now, especially seeing as I've had my own little struggles. Um, it's been up and down. Unfortunately, when it comes to mental health, your road's never going to be straightforward. But at the end of the day, I'm still so grateful to be doing what I'm doing, so grateful to be working where I'm working. And, at the end of the day, you find yourself making a difference in the smallest of ways. Recently, I've been focusing on mental health and all its different forms on my own page, just trying to spread a little bit of awareness. It's really one of my biggest passions.
Cool. Docket says, ons ken jou, Lara. So I think you do have some.
Hey,
You've
Nathan.
got some followers here. Clementine and Lara, I mean, you both started right at the beginning, really, of COVID. And you, Clementine, in particular, don't actually know, haven't experienced working as a doctor outside of COVID. But what has your experiences been? I mean, much has been said about the sheer amount of traumas that healthcare workers have to go through during COVID. What has your experiences been like working on the front line during a wave, for example?
Yeah. Would you mind if I go first?
Sure, go for it.
All
So,
yours.
yeah, I think COVID fatigue, first of all, is a very real thing. And I definitely suffer from that. Like, if I tell you I'm done with swabbing patients, like, I'm so done. If I could buy the swab, I would, but I can't. I think I'll start off with an anecdote, which is just one of the ward rounds I was on maybe a month ago. That really, I mean, to be honest, you don't feel as much in the moment because you're just driving like on such little sleep. First of all, you just want to get done with the ward round. But there are moments that strike you more than others. And I remember this one day. In the hospital that I worked at, you have the respiratory side and you have the non-respiratory side. And as this warden was going along, literally there was, let's say, 5 beds in an open space. And this granny had a ventilator. She had come from private and her funds had run out. So now she was obviously our responsibility. And she came to us with CPAP on. So for us, we stratify patients. And it's not necessarily because she was old, but you have to take the patient's complete context into account. So is she old, but how frail is she? Does she have any comorbidities? Is it controlled or not? How is she vaccinated or not? Which I'll get into later, because I know that stirs up a lot of topical things. But anyway, on this ward round, we were literally going past and I was like, so we're going to have to take that CPAP off this lady because I want to give it to this mom that has 3 kids and will have a better prognosis. So I'm literally saying that I'm going to kill this lady and give this machine to somebody else who has a better chance. I had another patient who I could see was dying in front of me, but because she was such a poor candidate for a higher oxygen delivery kind of apparatus, I had to watch her die. And I was like, are you serious? I'm running around all the different floors of the hospital to run her gas. And then my consultant starts and he's like, Clementine, but there's no point in even doing this gas. Thank you for doing it, but there's no point because the decision's already made. I was like, so I'm just going to stand here and watch this lady die. And he was like, yeah. So that's been COVID.
Yeah. Man, that's rough, eh? That's really rough. And there's a term, I think, that speaks exactly to this. It's let me just remember it. It's called moral injury, and what it is when in the context of healthcare, you have healthcare workers that want to do so much more that they can. But because of the constraints of the health system, you don't have enough resources, or because of the overwhelming nature of COVID, you just can't offer the service that you want to offer. So, I mean, be it because you're private, but more so in the context of COVID, where pre-vaccines and any knowledge about how to treat severe COVID, we didn't have the ability actually to give them health. And that moral injury causes a lot of angst in healthcare workers. And we don't have the ability to debrief, right? We don't have the ability to reflect and think about it. And because guess what? You finish your shift, and then tomorrow you got a new shift. And it builds up over time. And I can only imagine how my experience with that is pre-COVID, in a clinical sense, has just been compounded with COVID. And so Lara, I mean, what we've spoken about offline is that, you know, all these pressures can really affect a doctor's mental health. And people that are non-medical, that are listening or watching, may not actually be aware that doctors are very bad patients. We don't like to acknowledge when we're sick physically, and certainly not from a mental health perspective. And people may be more surprised that there's a tremendous amount of stigma in the profession as well. Could you talk us through what your experience has been like, with through COVID, before COVID, and just generally what your experiences has been like?
Okay, cool. Just bear with me. It might be a bit of a long story. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm probably the worst patient out there, for starters. So I'm just good to know that I'm not the only one. Let's see, pre-COVID, I mean, we were overworked already. I mean, I remember we started off, beginning pre-COVID, surgery ward rounds over a weekend. You end up seeing, 80 to 90 patients over that weekend. Consultants expect you to have a ward round sorted by 8 o'clock. And, you end up starting your round at 8 o'clock the previous night, and so much can happen in 12 hours. I know it sounds silly, but I mean, the expectation was there from the start. Anyone who's worked New Year's on a normal sort of week or a normal year before COVID can tell you that enough is out there. It's hectic. It'll give you PTSD in its own right. I'm pretty sure I've had one call over New Year's where I think I've possibly been scarred for life. You see patients sitting in the hallways, triaged as a yellow or an orange, and 3 hours after that, you sort of walk past and you realized, but they aren't breathing anymore, which is shocking. I mean, then again, it falls down, or it comes back down to the whole, you want to do so much more than what you can do. You sort of feel like your hands are chopped off. So already, you're dealing with that sort of fatigue. Compassion fatigue will set in at some point as well. I mean, you just sort of lose the ability to care. And I think it's a very big coping mechanism. I don't think we want to do it. It's not necessarily something that we as compassionate people intend on doing. But it's going to happen because at the end of the day, our job is to get through it, to just finish that ward round, finish your procedures, finish that theatre list. There's not much else to say. I'm pretty sure we've all been in that situation. Throw in a once in a century pandemic. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I can tell you now, I have not had any experience in internal medicine. I think my entire internal block was just COVID. I remember we were sitting on our calls, which were coming, pretty much every 3 days, because we had colleagues falling sick, and, with staff shortages, you find yourself working insane hours, and I mean, I'm not going to lie, also tired of swabbing patients, but it's more than that. It's admitting 30, 40 patients every single night that you're on call. It's about running out of space to put them. I mean, you can't end up leaving these patients in hallways because, number one, they require oxygen, and number two, they're COVID positive. There's no logic to that, but again, it's what we did.
So
We
talk us through how those conditions, how does it affect you? How do you, on those moments in the call where, where Clementine said that you have to make decisions literally between life and death right there, which, as a junior should not be a decision that you're making. How does that affect you? How did it affect you?
So, for me personally,
Yeah.
So again, and I started off as a very compassionate sort of, the typical do-gooder. We all want to do well. We all want to keep the compassion going. We all want to save lives. I mean, that's why we studied medicine and became doctors, right? I went from that to a very disillusioned version of myself. I did suffer from compassion fatigue, and surprisingly enough, it's the people around me that noticed it first. And negativity starts setting in, and you start realizing that, it's actually starting to get pretty damn hard waking up in the mornings. Your mood drops. You end up with a little bit of insomnia. Unfortunately, I fell on that spectrum. Your appetite goes, which again isn't ideal if you're working insane hours. And you just become a very unpleasant person to be around. And one of my friends.
At that moment, in that moment, sorry to interrupt. Did you?
Yeah, no.
Did you feel that these were warning signs, red flags of mental health, or did you just think, "Oh, that's kind of what it is to be a doctor, right? Chronically fatigued and overtired, and sometimes insomnia, and needing a Red Bull to get through the day"? What was your thought process?
So, I mean, ironically enough, I wasn't the person to point these things out.
Yeah.
It was my closest friend who pointed it out, and she said to me, "Listen, you haven't noticed this, but I have, because I've known you for a while now, and you are changing, and it's not necessarily in a good way." So, it's via this that I sort of thought, oh wow. These are red flags. I mean, we all should know these red flags. We've read about them in the DSM-5.
We tell it to our patients. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember deciding to seek psychiatric help, and eventually I did. And it was the best decision that I could have made. It was very difficult for me to admit that I had a problem. It's still difficult to admit to it. At the end of the day, it took, I think, about 3 psychiatrists to actually tell me, "Listen, you've got a problem and you need to start acknowledging it." Just because I'm a stubborn person in general. But when I initially started with therapy sessions, trying different medications, actually getting well-rested sleep by means of medication, you sort of start getting this, like, almost more insight into what it means to be a happier person, as well as a doctor at the same time. I know it sounds stupid, but how many of us wake up in the mornings going, "Yo, am I actually really happy doing what I'm doing?" And I mean, it's something that, again, like I said, it's an up and down sort of like road.
Well, I think it's very brave. I mean, you are very brave, and the posts and the content that you put out there is very brave. I think, and that was a key part of the documentary as well, is to say, the only way we're going to start to make a change is if we speak about it more, is if we normalize the conversation of saying it's okay to not be okay. And I think people like you, I mean, and hopefully will inspire others to come forward. We've spoken a lot about the fact that doctors are very bad patients, but it's true for a reason. I mean, that for anybody, it's difficult to recognize the signs. I mean, what does it actually mean to have, the vegetative symptoms of depression, for example? What does it mean? Do you recognize that you're not eating enough? Well, I was on call for 3 days in a row, so I didn't eat. So, how do you start to unpack that?
That's
I
normal.
think
Thank you
I
for
think
what
what's
you did.
also difficult is that we work in an environment where it isn't okay to say you're not okay.
Yeah,
It's only
Exactly.
okay to just keep going.
yeah,
There is no
absolutely.
out for a doctor because, or at least in my experience, there is no out.
Yeah,
They depend on you. If you're not there, like if you're physically not there, I mean, it's not your problem, but when you are there, it's definitely your problem. And the
yeah,
buck ends with you, the responsibility ends with you. And I think that's something for me that has been a huge eye opener since actually becoming a doctor, is realizing the
Yeah.
level of dependency of patients. And I guess the rest of the healthcare team as well have on you. If you don't do something for this patient, it's not going to happen. If you don't make it
yeah,
happen, it won't happen. And when you have 11 patients or 15 patients on your head like that, it's a lot to cope with. And you have to like keep lists, keep tabs on everyone, make sure that has happened, make sure that medication was actually given, make sure that gas is actually done. So your patient actually comes out of DKA and the drip is still working whilst trying to clock 3 other patients that are also severely ill. And also, I wanted to just like highlight some of the frustrations I think we experience on call, because I think it will explain why the PTSD
yeah.
thing is not just a joke, but I think it's a real thing. So I think for me, one of the things I didn't anticipate was it's, first of all, it's seniors versus juniors, because I don't come from an environment like that. So in the previous hospital that I work at, and my friends already know what I'm talking about because they're tired of listening about this hospital. But it's because I have a better experience, so therefore I can compare, right? So people actually work together. People are actually happy to come to work. They enrich the environment with their skills. So it means just that it flowed, you know. Whereas in the hospital I'm currently working at, it's like juniors versus seniors. Who can be more passive aggressive today? How can I assert my dominance over you because the consultant actually maybe mocked me, and now I can mock you and take out all my frustrations on the intern, because as an intern I don't actually have a voice and I don't have agency and I can't actually say no, and then that's not
Yeah,
okay. I have to say
yeah,
yes, boss, to everything that you say. So that's the one thing that has stood out for me a lot during internship. Also, like the understanding the role of the nurse and trying to work with them. So not every single nurse is willing to work with you, but I think once you learn their ways and their dynamics and what their roles and responsibilities are, it just makes your life a little bit easier. And then also taking on other responsibilities that doctors aren't supposed to. Like I've literally already administered medication when I'm not supposed to, because that's supposed to be the nurse's job. I've ported patients all over the hospital. I'm not supposed to do that. I've also had to, you know what I mean? Like it's having more responsibilities than you should be having. I've also had to call alone, which like with no senior support, only my consultant on like WhatsApp, which was crazy. And as I was going into that call, my friend was like, "Aren't you anxious?" And I was like, "I must be anxious about this. Oh my gosh!" Now I was like working
now I am.
overdrive. And I think for me, the worst part of that call wasn't actually, it was being alone, but it was trying to anticipate what the referral hospital was going to send in. So I was thinking, they said this patient might be an ICU candidate. And I'm tripping like, so is this patient going to make it all the way to the hospital I'm currently at? And like, what condition, stable or unstable, are they going to arrive at? And I think that anticipatory anxiety was probably the worst part of that call for me. Because when I looked, once the patients arrived and I could actually deal with them, it was fine. But the
Yeah,
anticipation of what would come was a lot. And then I just, because I want to just link this to the PTSD thing. So, in certain hospitals, I'm not sure how every hospital works, but obviously there's monitors everywhere. And especially with COVID, there's SATS monitors happening all the time. And in like a resus or high care area, which requires more care and attention, those monitors are beeping all the time. And I think for me, when I leave the call, like as soon as I'm out of that hospital, like I leave all those problems there and I just like am so relieved that it's over. But then what I've noticed now is that I have like these day nightmares.
yeah.
Like those monitors don't stop beeping. Like I can't sleep at all. It's terrible. So I'm like, no,
I
I'd rather
remember
not
those.
sleep there.
Yeah, I
I
remember from neonates also, the
Yo,
chat monitors, and when you kind of just hear it at the back of your head when
yo.
you in your post-call delirium. Is it really there? Not there? But
And like, I'd
I think
rather not sleep.
you've highlighted so many crucial things that I don't want to be missed. I mean, first of all, the fact that we have systemic factors that drive mental health problems, and the fact that doctors in particular and healthcare workers in general have one of the highest rates of depression and anxiety and suicide in particular in the world amongst all professions, it's not anything to say that doctors or health professionals themselves are weak or different from anybody else. Not at all. If anything, it should be a reflection of this external hazardous working environments. We've got moral injury that you spoke about. We've got long working hours, and you've got this culture which you touched on, Clementine, of hierarchy and toxic working conditions and bullying. And all of this is really a confluence of factors which drives a healthcare worker to breaking point, really, which I think both of you have tremendously highlighted. So I think I want to thank you very much, first of all, for bravely sharing your stories. It can't be easy, but as I keep saying, the more we have these discussions, the more we normalize these discussions, the more people will feel inspired, I think, to start speaking out. So there's tremendous value, even though we didn't necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of what should be done differently. I don't think that should be an issue. One of the greatest highlights, I think, that I'll take off from starting the Behind the Frontline movement is people reaching out to me to say, thank you. I finally feel like I have a voice. I finally feel that when I watch this or I engage with the content, that there are others like me out there. And I think that's so powerful, to give people that sense of agency, to give people that sense of, yeah, I'm not flipping crazy, man. It's not me that's broken. It's the system that's broken. So, yeah, I mean, thank you very much, ladies. It's been an absolute pleasure. I don't want to keep you any longer. Clementine, I'm very worried someone's going to crash behind you.
No, it's fine. Like I said, everybody's stable. Everybody's at peace, hopefully.
Yeah.
Someone touch a piece of wood, please.
I prayed about it. It's fine.
So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you, Clementine. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
And at the same time, I'm going to try and add.
I don't know how to exit.
Neither do I. Or you can still show me, I think. Let me send Cyan a message. Joy. There we go.
Tom.
Hi, Cyan. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Very excited to be chatting to you. Okay,
likewise, I've loved the conversation so far.
Thank you for making time available. For those that don't know, Cyan she's a real powerhouse, I think, in mental health. She produced a really insightful documentary, which I don't want to put too many words into her mouth, though. Cyan, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to do to make the documentary, and actually what the documentary is about?
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share. And Lara and Clementine, thank you so much for sharing your stories. It was a really powerful way to start this broader conversation. So I'm Cyan, and I studied medicine, and I'm now finishing off my master's in public health. I am an Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity at Takano in South Africa, and that's informed a lot of my work in the public health and subsequent mental health space. So I never worked in the mental health space before until about 2 years ago, but I was part of this conversation with a few public health leaders in our country, and they were talking about the national health insurance, and all of a sudden the conversation pivoted to demonizing doctors and saying, oh, well, they're immigrating and they don't care and they earn so much money. And I was really taken back. And my initial reaction was, to get really upset and sort of tell them that's not the case. But I just took a moment and I realized, gosh, I don't think these people are saying this from a point of ignorance or from a point of malice. I think it's just ignorance. I think it's that this narrative that we're discussing here today around what the realities of being a doctor in South Africa is all about is actually not in the mainstream media. People don't understand. And I think because a lot of us share these frustrations and feelings with each other and not maybe, you know, the public, this narrative is not out there. And so I decided to take the leap and produced A Quiet Implosion, which had 3 different doctors at very different life stages and just journeys of medicine. One who had left medicine, one who was an MO, and one who was going to specialize, all speak really deeply and vulnerably about what it has been like. And I think what was really interesting for me is that it wasn't a focus on all the hardcore things of how long the calls are and, you know, how under-resourced certain environments are. It was just reflecting from a deeply emotional and personal point of view on these realities. And when some people share their realities, there was an unconscious permission for other people to start sharing theirs. And it was really, I think, a catalyst for conversation around how do we extend this narrative beyond just doctors, and how do we shift this narrative that was so unhelpful in my initial conversation with my colleagues, you know, to a more accurate one around what healthcare workers go through in South Africa. And that's brought me into this space because I think we can't change much else in public health if our workforce and our healthcare workers are functioning in a system that they cannot win, they cannot thrive, and essentially the system doesn't look after them. And so that's really prompted a lot of my work since then.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think why we always synergize so well is that our messages are almost identically aligned, in that we recognize, like you, I recognize that the healthcare worker is a symptom of a wider problem, and vice versa actually, because when you look at the healthcare worker that's suffering with the mental health, there are downstream ripple effects that occur, and so that when you have conversations with lay people, it's not only that they are, as you say, ignorant of the plight of doctors, that, you know, yeah, they have got a lot of money, so why are they complaining? It's not only that, it's also the fact that, guys, if we don't fix the pivotal cogs in our health system, which are the healthcare workers, then the healthcare system is going to collapse, which as COVID has shown, especially at the peak of waves, is everybody's problem actually. So this problem of mental health in healthcare workers, of overall health really of healthcare workers, it's everybody's problem. We are all invested in it. And I think that's what's been so pronounced about COVID, is that COVID has brought many of these issues to the fore. For the first time, lay people were speaking about PPE and full hospital beds and really grasping what we have been saying for years, is that, you know, the health system is broken, guys. It's broken, and it's going to take a pandemic, or it's going to take something to show that we have nowhere to hide.
Absolutely. And I think that framing is so important. And as you were saying in your previous discussion with Lara and Clementine, it is really important to share this conversation and to speak up and to normalize that. But it's also a question of who we're speaking to and how we're framing it. Is it just an issue of, oh, the doctors are under strain, which they are? Or actually, does that fall within a bigger issue of health equity and health systems? Yeah. And if the healthcare workers can't function in the system because burnout is normalized, exhaustion is normalized, that's going to lead to a lot of adverse incidents. That's going to lead to, you know, the patients who can least afford healthcare and those who really struggle with access being further disadvantaged. It's going to lead to, you know, a lot of doctors emigrating. It's going to lead to unnecessary hierarchies in hospitals and not taking a multidisciplinary approach. And so it's a much bigger issue. And I think when we speak about it, we also need to speak about it in that framing of it's not just about an individual. It's actually about a society. And at that level, I really hope that we do have levers to actually pivot something when people realize it's not a them and an us, it's an all of us. We're a community. Yeah.
So let's try to talk solutions. I mean, both of you and I have said that there's tremendous value in giving people agency and giving people a voice and having advocacy. But let's start to speak about solutions and specifically with mental health. it's quite clear that we can't speak about mental health, especially in this context, without looking at the systemic factors. But what do you think are some of the ways that we can start to address these challenges? And if you could share some of the things that you are doing already.
This is one of the things that I really had to sit with long and hard after the launch of the documentary, because there was a lot of people who reached out and said, how do we help? How do we support? How do we change things? And to be honest with you, it's a very, very difficult topic, and I'm not going to claim that I have any answers. I think I'm very much at the beginning of my journey of thinking about how we can go about changing this, because you're right, there are these massive systemic issues, but at the same time, some of that is out of our control. Some of it is in our control, but there's also individual level issues. And where do you focus? And does one feed another? And what I'm thinking about at the moment is simply that what I've seen is that most healthcare workers are already burnt out. Asking them to start systemic change makes them even more burnt out, which contributes to a bigger problem often. And so it has to be from a multidisciplinary perspective, where we have a lot more people than just healthcare workers coming in on this conversation, so that we form small pockets that can change things. On the systemic side, COVID has actually really encouraged me with what we've seen in terms of movements. We've seen tackling institutional racism. We've seen calling out right-wing extremism. We've seen tackling environmental degradation and climate change through pockets of people that have just had enough. And I think the pandemic pushed them over the edge, you know, and I think we've seen small groups of people enact huge change. And I really think that's possible here. I think there's a critical mass that's needed of enough people that says, actually, 30-hour calls are not going to work in our system, and the max is going to be 16, and that critical mass can help change things. With that being said, I recognize that is an extremely hard task, one that has been tried before, and for many of our system level issues, it's about continued advocacy. And I think as healthcare workers, we're sometimes unfamiliar or uncomfortable with the activism side of this cause, right? Because it often comes at a personal cost. It sometimes causes a lot of chaos in your internal team, in your hospital, if you're standing up for something. But I think there has to be a point where speaking up has to translate into advocacy, which is a definite modus operandi of creating a movement. But then, I mean, that's a system level speak. At an individual level, I think I created a space after the documentary. I had no idea how it was going. It was a moment of vulnerability to put a post on LinkedIn, send some emails and say, listen, there's been a lot of questions around what we do. Here's an open invitation to anyone who wants to come. We meet the last Monday of every month for an hour and a half, and we discuss a topic together. And different healthcare workers have shared their stories. It's completely multidisciplinary. We've dissected topics, the dark side of medicine. We've really, I think, created an open, honest space. And that's been really interesting, because I think we have been able to, in some ways, create a community around this, where it's not you're arriving to do something and it's more work. You just show up, take what you need. If you need to just be there in silence, or if you need to vent, do that. If you're someone who can offer resources, do that. And I do think through pockets of change and support, and having a space for people to actually replenish their souls, you're going to be able to see small level change, which grows bigger. You know, I read something the other day, because I think we often get demotivated that individual level change can't do anything. But I was reading that when Gandhi came to South Africa, he was doing an internship for his law career at that point, and he witnessed the suffragette movement do a non-violent, peaceful protest. And there were a tiny group of women at that point campaigning. And that is where he got his idea for non-violence from, which of course rippled the whole world over and had fundamental consequences for history. But that was just from a few individuals creating change. And whilst it's very different topics here, I'm aware, and it's not as easy, I do think we should be conscious that our individual actions to show care, to create safe spaces, to have conversations, can have really powerful and positive effects, even if it's just in our immediate community, because you never know where that can lead. And so the long answer that I've given you is that I think it's individual and it's systemic. People like you doing advocacy, and I think if we keep that tension, it'll hopefully lead to results.
I absolutely love it. I mean, first of all, don't belittle anything that you're doing. That group that session that you have, if you want to call it a group venting session, even it's so tremendously powerful to have that space for people. And I realize the irony when I say this, but it's so important to have non-doctors in this conversation. It's ironic because this whole panel is just doctors. I get that, but it's so critical because then we have the fresh ideas. Where's our allied health to come up with new ideas? We are our lawyers. We are our politically inclined. We are our social justice movement people. One of the problems that doctors have is that we have this strong sense of a Hippocratic oath. You spoke about, we want to cut down on the 36-hour shifts. But if at the back of our mind, that's going to impede on patient care and health care delivery, we have that strong moral sense of, oh, okay, not really. So I'll push to a limit. I won't strike. I won't not tend to the sick. And there's a space, there's a chasm that opens up, right? Management or whatever you want to call it, the man, just enters that space and takes advantage of us, because they know that we have limits. So if we have organized labor, if we have other people externally that support us and say, no, hang on a second, you don't have to take the X, Y, and Z. You can consider legally taking sick days if you need to. You can, it's management's problem actually. You don't have to accept bullying and discrimination in your workplace. And that, it's so powerful to have a multidisciplinary approach with multidisciplinary ideas also. So that's something I've definitely taken on board in all our discussions. Many of my discussions are just with doctors and my doctor friends. So it's something I'm really taking to heart, and all the best to you. I really hope that the forum itself grows from strength to strength. And I'm keen for more of your work, more documentaries, hopefully, and whatever else fantastic initiatives. I really do hope that we can synergize in the future and work together as well.
Thanks, Adil. And likewise, I think we need more people like you as well who are taking initiatives, starting conversations. And I think the more of us can actually take on this task together, the easier it'll be. And completely agree with your multidisciplinary comments. And I just wanted to add one caveat to that is I think also when we're in groups of very different people, we become aware of our own blind spots. And I think sometimes as doctors, as you said, in some ways we're part of the problem, how sometimes what we do or don't accept, or to an extent sometimes how we treat other healthcare workers, not everyone of course, but I think it would be naive to assume that we are only on the receiving end of these issues. And so I think just having that reflexivity and open-mindedness to in which spaces do we discuss this and how do we broaden the conversation is really enriching for everyone. And to make sure that we can take ownership of what we need to and advocate for change for what we need to in a collective way.
Yeah, absolutely love it. So thank you very much again for taking me up on the invitation. And let's continue the conversation.
Thanks, Adil.
Thank you. Take care. I do see Prof. Glover is online. Hi, Prof.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. Very well. Thank you very much for coming. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Adele? Always lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to speak again. Sorry for keeping you waiting a little bit.
No problem.
Prof, I mean, I know you very well by now. We've crossed a lot of paths already. I'm a big fan of the work that you do. But for those that don't know what a powerhouse we have with us, could you give us a quick intro of who you are and some of the great initiatives that you are running with, especially focusing on junior doctors, who I know are very close to your heart.
Now you want me to blow my own trumpet?
blow away, Prof. Blow away.
Yeah, well, my name is Norris. I'm a dermatologist by profession, and I'm a professor, and I'm also the head of dermatology as well as the dean of the School of Clinical Medicine at UKZN. Yeah, I've got my interest is on ethnic skin and hair, and that's what my PhD was, and as well as HIV and skin. And what else? Well, some of the initiatives I've started are a mentorship program for junior doctors and interns. At KZN, we have these on a monthly basis. In fact, we just finished one just before joining this. And we've mentored quite a number of young doctors and junior interns. Now they're running it on their own. We've had a number of topics where we engage on different subspecialties. We also have a registrar support group at KZN where we welcome and create a platform to support registrars through their FOIA training. What else have I done? So, well, some other initiatives, support groups for patients with albinism, as well as patients with hair loss and patients with. We've also started an initiative where we've been teaching primary healthcare doctors all over the country, on common skin conditions. Yeah, that's just a few of the things that I've done. Yeah, I think that's enough for now.
And Prof, could you tell us why the mentorship program in particular is so close to your heart? I mean, okay, first of all, for people that are not involved in healthcare, why is there such a need for mentorship?
Well, I think some of you who read all these personal development books, you'll know that they talk about 10,000 hours, they talk about mentorship, they talk about, sharing of skills and expertise. It's very important because firstly, there's a saying in Xhosa that goes, "Inyathi buzwa kwabaphambili," meaning that you don't want to follow a certain path. You want to ask those who are ahead of you how they've, where what's a nyata? I think it's a zebra, whatever, an animal. Yeah. Try to think what it is in English. Yeah. But for me, more special is the fact that I've never had anyone to mentor me when I was a medical student, registrar, junior consultant. So one had to actually fend for oneself. So I realized the need for this, and hence I felt, let life be better for the junior doctors that are coming behind us. Let them not struggle and go through all the challenges that we had to go through. So having someone to hold your hand is very, very important. It's almost like having a role model, almost having parents to guide you. But these parents now are your professors and academics and colleagues who are going to guide you through your path and assist you.
I mean, I absolutely love it. It is so refreshing every time I speak to you because, again, for those that are not familiar with the healthcare environment, this is not the norm. More often than not, people are told, yeah, I did the Friday, Sunday calls. I did the 36-hour shift, so you must also do it. I had to fend for myself. It was much more difficult in my day, so you must also fend for yourself. So it's so refreshing to hear you say these things, that, just because we've had it rough does not mean the next generation and the generations thereafter need to have it rough.
Yeah, things have to be better with each generation. They think they have to be better. Even with your family, things have to be better with each generation. So it's important. Even the webinars that we started recently on academic bullying, they were really about trying to address some of the issues that we were challenged with when we were younger and registrars. And therefore now we felt, let our younger doctors not go through the same challenges, during their training.
Let's touch on that webinars on academic bullying, and that I think it's intended to create awareness, number one, and number two, to give some of these behaviors a name. What has the response been like, both from the juniors, who would, I'm sure, be appreciative, but then also of the seniors in the departments? What has the response been like at UKZN?
It's been actually phenomenal and amazing. because, registrars attended, students attended, consultants and heads of departments also attended and shared some of their views. And there were most of them actually are also advocates against academic bullying. So it's been really a successful initiative. And we've now come up with posters together with some of my colleagues from University of Stellenbosch, Professor Soraya Sidat, and the psychologist. Forgive me, I just forget her name. But we worked on posters, which I'm also happy to share with you. And any of the listeners that are here, you can post this. So,
Please do.
And then, and the nice thing about the advocacy against academic bullying is that the university has now come up with a policy where there's a 24-hour anonymous call that you can, phone if you experience academic bullying. And also it's created a platform where the victims as well as the perpetrators of academic bullying will attend workshops, they'll be counseled, because it's well and good to identify and advocate, but what do you do about the victims and perpetrators? Because perpetrators and victims actually tend to repeat the cycle because that's what they've watched, that's the role model they've seen. So it's important that there's intervention to try and abort the practice.
I mean, that is so key. The perpetrator of today was the victim of yesterday, and that cycle just goes on and on. We are products of our societies. So
yes.
I mean, that is so insightful that you involve the perpetrator as well as the victim in the essential therapy counseling, and to say let's get on top of it. And it's really encouraging to hear that people have taken it on board and are responding to it positively. In your conversations with, I know you speak to the other deans around the country, is there an appetite throughout the country as well, or is it slow going at this stage?
No, actually, in there's the committee of deans called SACOMT. We discussed this, and I've actually shared the webinars, and I've invited some of the deans to join our webinars, and also they've created recordings which we posted on social media. So they really are very supportive of the initiative. And we've also shared the posters with them, and they can use them in their institutions. And I must say the South African Committee of Deans, I mean, they are a lovely bunch of colleagues, are very supportive of progress and support of doctors. So it's really a pleasure to be part of the committee right now.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
And lastly, Prof, if there are junior doctors and any healthcare worker really, seniors included, that are watching or listening, how can they get involved? If not with your initiative per se, if they're not involved in UKZN, for example, if they're at other institutions, what can they do in their own capacity? How can they lobby for change in their own environment? Taking cognizance of the fact that not everybody is as progressive as you are, and that they will often have resistance. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good question. In fact, soon after the webinars that we had, I had emails sent to me from, I won't mention the universities, about 3 universities. One of the students, registrars, they sent me, and I said, look, I'm happy to assist you to address your issues, because we are in the Committee of Deans. I can easily contact my colleagues and inform them that there's this particular problem, but the doctor or the young doctor may be scared or terrified to approach this, so please assist. So that would help. But again, those who are interested to spread the word, I'm happy again to share the posters that we have. They're quite informative and they're quite punchy. So that I can share them, they can print them, they can put them on their social media. They can, when everyone is back after COVID, of course with permission, they can put them on their lecture theaters, on their notice boards where students are. That's because that's what we'll be doing at our medical school.
Absolutely love it. Prof, I always say to you, if you ever decide to leave medicine and go into politics, you definitely have my vote. I think there's a position in Parliament waiting for you someday. I say that with full sincerity. I love speaking to you. Please do say hello to Wakiti. It's funny enough, I didn't actually know he was your son when I contacted him for the documentary. So that it was just a fortuitous blessing. But
Yeah,
thank you
I
very
mean,
much for your time.
thanks, Daddy. You're doing great work too, and young person. It's not easy to plan these, invite the busy professors and people and plan. So I appreciate what you are doing and keep doing what you are doing. And as for myself, when you need me anytime, if I can enhance your platform, please feel free to contact me. And I'll
Thank you,
send
Prof.
your regards to Agiti. And as I say, to all those who have joined, if you need the posters or any assistance, please contact Adil and Adil can make contact with me. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Prof. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you. Okay, I think I'm just going to close off by saying thank you again for everybody that's joined. I saw there were a number of comments. Unfortunately, I didn't get to all of them. Thank you to Lara, Clementine, and Cyan again as well. It was a really cool discussion. It was, as I said, my first of these. If you enjoyed it, please let me know. I would love the feedback. If you hated it, I also would like to know. I want to build on it and hopefully be doing a little bit more of these in the future. So please do reach out, DM me or connect on LinkedIn as well. I'm really keen to learn from this and do more in this space, hopefully in the future. And yeah, get your vaccine. Don't wait, vaccinate. Time is running out. Please, 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 before the fourth wave, if you haven't already. I think it's really important. And obviously, let's continue this conversation about mental health, about the challenges of healthcare workers in general, and let's have more of this open, frank conversations, which normalize these conversations, and to say that yes, it's okay to not be okay. Thanks, Prof. Prof did put a email in the chat as well. But yeah, you're welcome to DM me, and I can contact Prof on your behalf too. Thank you very much, and take care.